What if I told you that the person everyone thought was helpless and broken was actually the strongest person in the room? And what if that person helped me expose the most devastating betrayal of my life? I'm Sarah, and this is the story of how my husband's disabled sister and I turned the tables on a family that thought they could use us both. Before I dive into this wild story, if you love tales of justice served ice cold, hit that like button and subscribe because this one is going to leave you speechless. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss how this ends. My name is Sarah, and I'm 33 years old. If you had asked me 3 years ago where I thought my life was heading, I would have painted you a picture of suburban bliss. A loving husband, maybe kids someday, Sunday dinners with the in-laws. God, was I naive. I met David at a bookstore in downtown Portland, Oregon. I was browsing the self-help section, ironic considering how much help I'd eventually need, and he was in the business section, wearing this perfectly pressed button-down shirt and holding a copy of some leadership manual. When he smiled at me, I felt that flutter you read about in romance novels, the kind that makes you forget to breathe for just a second. David was everything I thought I wanted. Stable job as a marketing director at a tech startup, owned his own condo, drove a reliable Honda Civic. After years of dating guys who couldn't commit to weekend plans, let alone a relationship, David felt like salvation wrapped in khakis and a friendly smile. Our first date was at this little Italian place in the Pearl District. He ordered wine like he knew what he was talking about, asked thoughtful questions about my work as a freelance graphic designer, and when he walked me to my car, he didn't try anything. Just a sweet kiss on the cheek and a promise to call. And he actually did call, the next day. For 8 months, everything was perfect. David would bring me coffee from my favorite shop on his way to work, remember the names of my difficult clients, and listen patiently when I complained about my mother's weekly phone calls asking when I was going to settle down and give her grandchildren. The first time I met his family was at his younger sister's birthday party. Emma was turning 26, and according to David, she'd been in a wheelchair since she was 12 after a severe case of meningitis left her with mobility issues and cognitive impairment. She doesn't talk much anymore, David had explained on the drive to his parents' house in Lake Oswego. But she's sweet. Just be patient with her, okay? My mom gets protective. His mother, Patricia, answered the door with the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. She was impeccably dressed in cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse, her gray hair styled in that way wealthy women maintain with weekly salon visits. Everything about her screamed control and judgment. "You must be Sarah," she said, looking me up and down like she was evaluating a used car. "David's told us so much about you." The house was immaculate. Not lived-in clean, but museum clean. White carpets that looked like they'd never seen a spill. Glass coffee tables that reflected every fingerprint. An artwork that coordinated with the throw pillows. I felt immediately out of place in my Target dress and shoes that were comfortable, but definitely not designer. And then I saw Emma. She was sitting by the living room window in a wheelchair, a soft pink blanket covering her legs, staring out at the perfectly manicured garden. When David introduced us, she turned slowly and looked at me with these incredibly bright green eyes. There was something there, intelligence, awareness, that didn't match the story I'd been told. "Hi, Emma," I said, crouching down to her eye level. "Happy birthday." She smiled and made a soft humming sound, then pointed to the window and made gestures I couldn't understand. "She's excited about the birds," Patricia said quickly, moving between us. "The feeder brings so many beautiful ones. Emma, honey, let's get you some cake." But as Patricia wheeled her away, Emma turned back to look at me, and I swear I saw her wink. Just for a second, so fast I almost missed it. The party was awkward. David's father, Richard, was pleasant enough, but seemed to defer to Patricia on everything. Patricia herself spent the entire time making subtle digs disguised as helpful suggestions. "Oh, you're a freelancer? How? Interesting. David's always been drawn to creative types. But I suppose stability is important when you're thinking about the future." "That's a lovely dress, dear. Very accessible price point. I have a wonderful personal shopper if you ever want some recommendations." "David mentioned you rent your apartment. In this market, I keep telling him how important it is to invest in property, but everyone has their own priorities, I suppose." Each comment felt like a paper cut, small, but they added up to real pain by the end of the night. David, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to his mother's passive-aggressive assault. He was too busy being the dutiful son, helping serve cake, laughing at his father's dad jokes, and making sure Emma was comfortable. But Emma kept watching me. When no one was looking, she'd catch my eye and make these subtle expressions. A raised eyebrow when her mother made a particularly cutting comment. A slight smile when I handled Patricia's criticism with grace. It was like she was studying me, evaluating me for something I didn't understand yet. After 6 months of dating, David proposed. It wasn't the most romantic proposal. He did it over dinner at Olive Garden because he had a coupon. But I said yes because I loved him, and because I thought love was enough to overcome anything. God, I was so young and stupid. The wedding was small, mostly because Patricia took over the planning and made it clear that my budget constraints meant we needed to be realistic about expectations. She chose the flowers, the venue, the menu, even the photographer. I felt like a guest at my own wedding, but David kept telling me to just let her handle it and pick your battles. Looking back, I should have seen that as a red flag the size of Texas. After the wedding, we moved into David's condo and I started to understand the family dynamics better. David spoke to his mother every single day. Not just quick check-ins, but long conversations about everything from his work projects to what he was having for lunch. If we made plans that conflicted with a family dinner or event, the plans changed. Always. Family is everything to the Hendersons, Patricia would say whenever I looked frustrated. That's something you'll learn in time, dear. And Emma was always there. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every family gathering, she'd be wheeled in and positioned by the window or near the TV, mostly ignored unless someone needed to move her or feed her cake. Watching her was heartbreaking. This young woman who should have been living her own life, dating, maybe working or going to school, instead trapped in this weird, suspended animation. But I started noticing things, little things, like how Emma's eyes would track conversations even when she was supposedly focused on something else, how she'd react to jokes with what looked like suppressed laughter, how her hand would tense when Patricia was being particularly nasty to me, as if she was fighting the urge to respond. I began sitting with her during family gatherings. I'd tell her about my day, show her pictures on my phone, ask her questions even though she couldn't answer. Patricia didn't like this. "Sarah, you don't need to entertain Emma," she'd say. "She's perfectly content watching her shows." But Emma wasn't watching her shows. She was watching me, and I was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was more going on behind those green eyes than anyone knew. My first real clue came about 6 months after the wedding. I was visiting on a Tuesday afternoon when Patricia was at her book club and Richard was playing golf. David was at work, and I'd stopped by to drop off some leftovers because Patricia had mentioned they were tired of eating the same things. Emma was in her room, sitting by the window as usual, but when I knocked and entered, she turned to look at me with an expression that was completely different. Alert, present, aware. "Hi, Emma," I said softly, setting the containers of soup on her dresser. "I brought some of that minestrone you seemed to like last week." She looked at me for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, she lifted her right hand and pointed to the door. Then she put her finger to her lips in the universal gesture for quiet. My heart started pounding. "Emma, can you understand me?" She nodded. Once, clearly, unmistakably. I felt like the world had shifted under my feet. "Oh my God, Emma, how long have you—" But before I could finish the question, I heard Patricia's car in the driveway. Emma immediately slumped back into her usual posture, her face going blank, her hands folding passively in her lap. Patricia burst through the front door with her usual energy. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" "I brought soup," I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I thought you might enjoy something homemade." "How thoughtful," Patricia said, but her tone suggested it was anything but. "Though next time, perhaps call first. Emma gets overwhelmed with too much stimulation." I looked at Emma, who was staring out the window again, giving no indication that anything had happened. But as I left the room, I swear I saw her catch my reflection in the window and give me the tiniest nod. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment, wondering if I'd imagined it. David was snoring next to me, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife had just discovered what might be the biggest secret his family had ever kept. Over the next few weeks, I started paying even closer attention to Emma. And the more I watched, the more convinced I became that she was not the helpless, cognitively impaired young woman everyone believed her to be. She knew things. When Patricia would gossip about neighbors, Emma's expression would change in ways that suggested she was following every word and forming opinions. When Richard would tell his terrible dad jokes, I'd catch what looked like eye rolls. And when Patricia would make her passive-aggressive comments about me, Emma's jaw would tighten like she was biting back words. But the real confirmation came 2 months later, during what I thought was a routine Sunday dinner. Patricia was in rare form that night, criticizing everything from my homemade rolls. "Store-bought is fine, dear. No one expects you to be Martha Stewart," to my outfit. "That color is so bold. Are you sure it's flattering?" Then my career. "Still doing the freelance thing? Isn't it time to think about something more stable?" David, as usual, said nothing. Just ate his dinner and made pleasant conversation with his father about the Blazers' latest game. But Emma was staring at her mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undisguised content. And then, when Patricia got up to clear the table and made another dig about how some people didn't know how to properly stack dishes, Emma's fork slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. "Oh, Butterfingers," Patricia said with exaggerated patience. "Let me get that for you, sweetie." As Patricia bent down to pick up the fork, Emma looked directly at me and mouthed 2 words so clearly there was no mistaking them. "Help me." That's when I knew that everything I thought I understood about David's family was a lie. And Emma wasn't the only one who needed rescuing. The weeks after Emma's silent plea were torture. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen, but I had no idea what to do with the information. How do you tell your husband that you think his supposedly disabled sister might be faking her condition? How do you even begin to prove something like that? I started researching meningitis and its long-term effects, reading medical journals until my eyes burned. What I learned was that while severe cases could indeed cause the kind of damage Emma supposedly had, the specific combination of mobility loss and cognitive impairment she displayed was unusual. Possible, but unusual. More importantly, I learned that many survivors of childhood meningitis went on to live completely normal lives. Some had lasting effects, others recovered fully, but Emma's case seemed frozen in time. No improvement, no decline. Just this static state of helplessness that had apparently lasted 14 years. I tried talking to David about it, but carefully. "Has Emma ever worked with physical therapists?" I asked one night as we were getting ready for bed. "Or speech therapists. I was reading about recovery techniques." David barely looked up from his phone. "Mom's tried everything over the years. The doctor said, this is just how she is now. We've all accepted it. But what if there are new treatments, new approaches? Maybe we could." "Sarah." David's tone was sharper than usual. "My mother has been taking care of Emma for 14 years. She knows what she's doing. Emma is happy and safe, and that's what matters." Happy and safe. The words stuck with me, because they felt wrong. Emma didn't look happy. She looked trapped. I started visiting more often when Patricia wasn't home. I'd make excuses, bringing groceries, checking if they needed anything, offering to help with household tasks. Really, I was trying to spend time with Emma and figure out what was really going on. It was during one of these visits that Emma made her next move. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes that Patricia had left soaking, which really meant for someone else to clean, when I heard a sound from Emma's room. A soft thud, like something falling. "Emma?" I called out, drying my hands on a dish towel. "Are you okay?" No response, but I heard the sound again. I walked to her room and found her in her usual spot by the window, looking perfectly normal. But there was a book on the floor beside her wheelchair, a thick hardcover novel that definitely hadn't been there before. Did you drop this? I asked, picking up the book. Emma looked at me, then very deliberately looked down at the book, then back at me. The book was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, a psychological thriller about a woman who refuses to speak after being accused of murdering her husband. The symbolism was so obvious it made my skin prickle. I whispered, looking around to make sure we were alone. Did you choose this book for me to see? She blinked once, slowly, deliberately. My hands were shaking as I opened the book. On the inside cover, in pencil, so light it was barely visible, someone had written, "Room, midnight, alone." I looked at Emma in shock. You wrote this? Another deliberate blink. You want me to come to your room at midnight, when everyone's asleep? A third blink, and this time, Emma's mouth curved into the smallest smile. That night, I told David I wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. I lay there for hours, watching the clock, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would wake him. At 11:45, I slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hall. Emma was awake, sitting up in her wheelchair in the dark room. When I entered, she held up her hand in a wait gesture, then pointed to her bedside table. There was a small flashlight there, the kind people use for power outages. I turned it on and aimed it down so it wouldn't be visible from the hallway. And then Emma spoke. "Thank God," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse, but completely clear. I was starting to think I'd have to spell it out in alphabet soup. I nearly dropped the flashlight. Hearing her actual voice, seeing her sitting up straight and alert, was like watching someone rise from the dead. "Emma, oh my God, you can talk, walk, think? Yeah, I can do all of those things." Her voice was bitter. Have been able to for years? But why? Why would you pretend to be? Emma's expression darkened. Because, Sarah, my dear stepmother made it very clear after my father died that I was nothing but a burden on this family. And when you're 17 years old and suddenly an orphan, sometimes survival means giving people what they expect. The words hit me like a physical blow. Stepmother? But I thought Patricia was your biological mother. Emma shook her head. My real mom died when I was 10. Dad remarried Patricia 2 years later. When I got sick with meningitis at 12, Dad spent every penny we had on my medical care. Patricia resented every dollar, every hour, every bit of attention that went to me instead of her precious David. She paused, her hands clenching in her lap. After Dad died 5 years ago, she made it clear that I could either play the helpless invalid and let her collect my disability benefits and inheritance, or I could find myself mysteriously too much to handle and end up in a state facility. The cruelty of it was staggering. Emma, that's elder abuse. Financial abuse. We could report her, get you help. With what proof? Emma's laugh was hollow. I've been playing this role for so long, who would believe me? My medical records show severe impairment. I have no work history, no education beyond high school, no way to support myself. Patricia made sure of that. I felt sick. Why are you telling me now? Why risk it? Emma looked at me with those impossibly green eyes, and I saw years of pain and frustration there. Because she's not just abusing me anymore, Sarah. She's destroying you too, piece by piece, and David's letting it happen. What do you mean? I mean, I sit in that living room every Sunday and watch her tear you down with a smile on her face. I see how she makes you question yourself, how she's slowly convincing David that you're not good enough for this family. And I see how alone you are in all of this. The accuracy of her observations was devastating, because I hadn't realized how obvious my misery had become. But more than that, Emma continued, I think she's planning something. I hear things, Sarah. Phone calls late at night, conversations with David when they think I'm not listening. I think she wants you gone, and I don't think she's planning to ask nicely. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of conversations? Emma hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. 3 weeks ago, I heard her talking to David about how unfortunate it would be if your marriage didn't work out, how sometimes people realize they made a mistake, how it would be better to end things before there were children involved or shared property to complicate matters. My mouth went dry. David said that? He didn't disagree, just kept saying, I don't know, Mom. And maybe you're right. Like he was already halfway convinced. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. My marriage, my home, my entire life. All of it built on what was apparently quicksand. What do I do? I whispered. Emma reached out and took my hand, the first purposeful physical contact she'd made with anyone in years. We help each other. I'll be your eyes and ears in this house, and you help me figure out how to get free of this nightmare. Over the next month, Emma and I developed a system. I'd visit during the day when Patricia was out, and Emma would share what she learned. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd imagined. Patricia wasn't just emotionally abusive, she was systematically stealing from Emma. The disability checks, the inheritance from Emma's father, even money that relatives sent for Emma's care, all of it went into Patricia's personal accounts. Emma was essentially a prisoner being held for profit. But the revelation that destroyed me came on a rainy Thursday in October. I'd come over to help Patricia with some household tasks. She called claiming she was overwhelmed and needed assistance, though I suspected it was just another way to assert control over my time. She'd gone to the pharmacy, leaving me alone with Emma. Sarah? Emma whispered urgently as soon as the car pulled out of the driveway. You need to see something. She directed me to Patricia's home office, a room I'd never been allowed to enter because it contained important family documents. Using a key she'd somehow acquired, Emma had me unlock the filing cabinet. Inside were folders labeled with our names. David's contained insurance papers and financial documents. Patricia's had investment statements and property deeds. Emma's folder was thick with medical records, disability applications, and bank statements showing thousands of dollars in monthly deposits. My folder was thin, but what was inside made my blood run cold. Divorce papers, already filled out, waiting only for signatures. A consultation report from a private investigator detailing my daily routines, my finances, my family background. And most damaging of all, a character assessment report that painted me as unstable, manipulative, and potentially dangerous. It described incidents that had never happened, conversations I'd never had, behaviors I'd never exhibited. But they were detailed enough, specific enough, that someone reading them would believe they were true. She's been building a case against you, Emma said softly, making David think you're not mentally stable so that when she finally convinces him to leave you, he'll feel justified. My hands were shaking as I photographed every document with my phone. How long do you think I have? Emma's expression was grim. Based on what I've been hearing, maybe weeks. She's been pushing harder lately, and David's starting to crack. Last night, I heard him on the phone with someone, maybe a lawyer, asking about protecting assets in case of an unstable spouse. That's when I knew I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my reputation, my future, maybe even my freedom. Because if Patricia's plan worked, I wouldn't just lose David. I'd be branded as the crazy wife who couldn't handle married life, and that label would follow me forever. We have to do something, I said. Both of us. Together. Emma nodded. I've been thinking the same thing. But Sarah, what we're planning, it's going to change everything. Once we start this, there's no going back. I looked at the divorce papers in my hands, at the lies written about me in official-looking reports, at the evidence of a systematic campaign to destroy my life. Good, I said, because I'm done being their victim. Emma smiled for the first time since I'd known her, a real, fierce, determined smile. In that case, she said, let me tell you what I've been planning for the past 5 years. And that's when I learned that Emma hadn't just been hiding her abilities all these years. She'd been gathering ammunition for the war she knew was coming. Emma's plan was brilliant in its simplicity and terrifying in its thoroughness. I've had a lot of time to think, she explained during one of our midnight meetings. And I've realized that Patricia's greatest strength, her need to control everything and everyone, is also her greatest weakness. Over the past 5 years, Emma had been documenting everything. She learned to use a smartphone that she kept hidden in her mattress, taking photos and recording conversations. When no one was watching, she'd memorized Patricia's daily routines, her passwords, her secrets. Most importantly, she'd been tracking the money. Every disability check, every payment from Dad's estate, every donation from relatives who thought they were helping with my care. Emma said, showing me a notebook filled with meticulous records. I know where every penny went, and I have proof. But financial fraud was just the beginning. Emma had also documented years of medical neglect, emotional abuse, and something that made my blood run cold, evidence that Patricia had been forging Emma's signature on legal documents for years. She's been signing my name to contracts, insurance forms, even loan applications. Emma said, legally speaking, that's identity theft and fraud, federal crimes. The scope of Patricia's criminal behavior was staggering, but Emma had been methodically building a case that would destroy her completely. The only thing she'd been missing was a way to present the evidence without it being dismissed as the fantasies of a disabled woman. That's where you come in, Emma said. You're credible, educated, married to her son. If you present this evidence, people will listen. But our plan went deeper than just exposing Patricia's crimes. We were going to destroy the entire foundation of lies this family had built their lives on. David thinks he's the golden child, Emma said, her voice hard with years of resentment. He has no idea how much money Mom has stolen from me to fund his lifestyle. The down payment on his condo, my inheritance. His car payments when he was struggling after college, my disability checks. That expensive engagement ring he bought you, money that was supposed to be for my medical care. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Everything David had given me, everything I'd thought represented his love and success, had been bought with money stolen from his disabled sister. He doesn't know, does he? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Oh, he knows, Emma said bitterly. Maybe not the specific details, but he knows Mom has been managing my finances, and that somehow there's always money available when he needs it. He just never asked questions because he didn't want to know the answers. That's when I understood that this wasn't just about exposing Patricia. It was about revealing David's complicity in his sister's abuse and his willingness to benefit from her suffering. The first phase of our plan involved gathering more evidence. I started visiting when Patricia was home, engaging her in conversations while secretly recording everything on my phone. It was easier than I expected because Patricia loved to talk, especially when she thought she was educating me about family loyalty and loved me about faithfulness. Knowing your place. You have to understand, Sarah, she said during one particularly revealing conversation. I had more and more. David's future is what matters. He has potential, real potential, and I won't let anyone or anything hold him back. What about Emma? I asked, innocently. Don't you want her to have a future too? Patricia's laugh was cold. Emma's future is being taken care of. She's safe, she's fed, she has a roof over her head. What more could she want? It's not like she's going anywhere or doing anything meaningful with her life. The casual cruelty in her voice was stunning, but it was exactly what we needed on tape. Meanwhile, Emma was using her supposed disability as cover for her own intelligence gathering. She'd learned to read lips so she could follow conversations even from across the room. She'd figured out how to access Patricia's computer when it was left unattended, downloading files onto a hidden USB drive. Most impressively, she'd been intercepting and photographing mail before Patricia could destroy it. IRS has been trying to reach her for months, Emma told me, showing photos of unopened letters. I think there's going to be an audit. Turns out claiming someone else's disability income as your own is frowned upon by the government. But the evidence gathering was just preparation. The real plan was much more dramatic. Emma had been in contact with a disability rights lawyer through an online advocacy group. Using a communication device that she claimed was for simple responses, but was actually fully functional, she'd been building a legal case with professional help. The lawyer, Maria Santos, was eager to take on a case involving such extensive abuse and fraud. She says it's one of the most clear-cut cases of financial and medical abuse she's ever seen. Emma told me, but she wants to coordinate with local authorities to make sure Patricia doesn't have a chance to destroy evidence or flee. That's where my role became crucial. As David's wife, I had access to the house and could ensure that Emma's evidence was preserved. More importantly, I could serve as the concerned family member who discovered the abuse and reported it. but we both knew that exposing Patricia's crimes would only be satisfying if David faced consequences too. That required a different approach. He needs to be publicly humiliated. Emma said matter-of-factly. Not just divorced or embarrassed, but completely destroyed socially and professionally. He needs to understand what it feels like to have everyone you trust turn against you. I thought about the character assassination report in Patricia's files, about the divorce papers already prepared, about David's willingness to believe his mother's lies about me. Anna was right. Private justice wouldn't be enough. That's when Emma told me about the family reunion. Every 2 years, the Hendersons held a massive family gathering. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, everyone who mattered in their social circle. It was Patricia's chance to show off, to demonstrate how well she'd maintained the family's reputation, despite the tragedy of Emma's condition. This year's reunion was scheduled for the Saturday before Thanksgiving at the community center of their upscale neighborhood. Patricia had been planning it for months, sending invitations, coordinating catering, arranging for professional photography to document the event. She's invited everyone, Emma said with a dark smile. Including people from Dad's side of the family who've been sending money for my care all these years. People who work in healthcare, in finance, in law enforcement. People who will understand exactly what she's been doing and what it means. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. We would attend the reunion as expected, Emma in her wheelchair, playing her role, me as the dutiful daughter-in-law helping with hosting duties. But at the perfect moment, when everyone was gathered and comfortable, Emma would stand up. Just stand up. And start talking. Imagine, Emma said, her eyes bright with anticipation. 60 people who've known me for years, who's watched me sit silent in that wheelchair, who've pitied me and sent money for my care. Imagine their faces when I not only stand up and walk, but start explaining exactly where their money has been going. But we know Patricia would try to spin it, to claim Emma was having some kind of breakdown or that we were manipulating her. So we planned to have everything ready, documents, recordings, testimony from medical professionals who would confirm Emma's actual capabilities. Maria is arranging for a police detective to be present, Emma told me. Not in uniform, just as a family friend, someone who can take official statements and make arrests if necessary. The timeline was tight. The reunion was 6 weeks away, which gave us time to finalize evidence collection, but not long enough for Patricia to discover our plan, or for David to follow through on any divorce proceedings. But there was one more element Emma wanted to add to the plan, something that would ensure David's professional destruction along with his personal humiliation. His company has a strict ethics policy, she explained. Employees can be fired for any behavior that reflects poorly on the organization. Being complicit in the financial abuse of a disabled family member, that would definitely qualify. Emma had researched David's workplace extensively. She knew his colleagues, his boss, his company's policies and procedures. She'd even identified several people who would be at the family reunion, neighbors and family friends who also happened to work in the tech industry. Word travels fast in that community, she said. By Monday morning, everyone in David's professional network will know exactly what kind of person he really is. As the reunion approached, I found myself feeling a mixture of excitement and terror. We were planning to destroy people I'd once considered family, to end relationships and ruin reputations. But every time I wavered, I'd remember the divorce papers with my name already filled in, or hear Patricia making another cutting comment about my inadequacy. They had started this war. Emma and I were just going to finish it. The week before the reunion, Patricia was in her element, calling me multiple times a day with tasks and instructions. Sarah, make sure you wear something appropriate. Nothing too flashy. We don't want you drawing attention away from the family. And please do something with your hair. Maybe ask Emma's stylist for suggestions. Emma's stylist. The irony was almost funny. Emma had been cutting her own hair in secret for years, making it look deliberately uneven and unkempt to maintain her disguise. Of course, Patricia, I said sweetly. I want everything to be perfect. And I meant it, because this reunion was going to be perfect. Perfectly devastating for everyone who had underestimated Emma and dismissed me. The night before the reunion, Emma and I had our final planning meeting. She was practically vibrating with excitement and nervousness. Are you ready for this? I asked her. Emma looked at me with those brilliant green eyes, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw her exactly as she really was. Intelligent, strong, and absolutely done with being anyone's victim. "Sarah," she said, "I've been ready for this for 5 years."
Huh.
And tomorrow the Henderson family was about to learn that the quiet, helpless girl they'd ignored all these years had been planning their destruction one careful step at a time. The morning of the reunion dawned gray and cold, which felt perfect for what we had planned. I woke up early and spent extra time getting ready, choosing a navy blue dress that was professional but not flashy, exactly what Patricia would approve of. I wanted to blend in completely until the moment came to stand out. David was unusually quiet during breakfast, just scrolling through his phone and drinking coffee. I wondered if he was nervous about something, if maybe Patricia had given him some hint about her plans for our marriage. "Big day today," I said, testing the waters. He looked up briefly and nodded. "Mom's been planning this for months. She wants everything to be perfect." "I'm sure it will be," I replied, and I meant it, just not in the way he expected. We arrived at the community center at noon to help with setup. Patricia was already there, directing the caterers and arranging flowers with military precision. She looked radiant in her emerald green dress, clearly in her element as the family matriarch orchestrating another perfect Henderson gathering. "Sarah, darling," she called out as soon as she saw me. "Could you help arrange the memorial table for Emma's father? I want it to be just right. So many people loved Richard and want to honor his memory." The memorial table. Of course Patricia would use her dead husband's memory as a centerpiece for the event where she was about to be exposed for stealing his daughter's inheritance. The irony was almost too perfect. Emma arrived an hour later with her usual caregiver, a sweet older woman named Janet, who Patricia paid to transport Emma to family events. Seeing Emma slumped in that wheelchair, playing her role one last time, I felt a surge of anticipation so strong it made my hands shake. "How is she today?" Patricia asked Janet with exaggerated concern. "Oh, about the same," Janet replied sadly. "I think she enjoys these family gatherings, even if she can't express it much." Emma caught my eye, and I saw the smallest smirk cross her face before it disappeared back into her usual blank expression. By 2 o'clock, the community center was packed. I counted at least 70 people, extended family, family friends, neighbors, colleagues. Everyone who mattered in the Henderson's social world was there, dressed in their Sunday best and carrying covered dishes or flower arrangements. I recognized faces from previous gatherings and family photos. David's elderly aunts from his father's side who'd been sending money for Emma's care, his uncle Mike, who worked as a police detective, his cousin Jennifer, who was a social worker. Neighbors who'd watched Emma grow up and had always spoken sadly about the tragic accident that had stolen her future. Patricia moved through the crowd like a gracious hostess, accepting condolences and praise with perfect composure. "It's so hard, you know," I heard her telling one of Richard's old colleagues. "Taking care of Emma all these years, watching her struggle. But family is family. We do what we have to do." The detective Maria Santos had arranged, a woman named Detective Rodriguez, was there posing as a friend of Richard's from his construction days. She blended in perfectly, chatting casually with guests while keeping a subtle eye on Emma and me. At 3:30, Patricia called for everyone's attention. The room quieted as she stood at the front, looking every inch the dignified widow and devoted mother. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice carrying easily across the room. "Richard would be so touched to see how many lives he impacted, how many people still care about our family after all these years." She went on for several minutes, talking about family legacy and sticking together through hardship. She mentioned Emma's condition with practiced sadness, describing the burden of care and the sacrifice she'd made to keep the family together. "And of course," Patricia continued, "none of this would be possible without the generous support so many of you have provided over the years. The donations for Emma's medical care, the help with expenses. It means more than you know." I saw several people nodding, clearly proud of their contributions. They had no idea their money had been funding Patricia's luxury lifestyle while Emma lived like a prisoner. That's when Emma made her move. It started small, just a shift in her posture, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Then she lifted her head higher than usual, and I saw a few people glance her way with mild curiosity. Emma seems more alert today, I heard someone whisper. Patricia was still talking, but I noticed her eyes flick toward Emma with a hint of concern. Emma had never shown this much awareness during a public gathering. Then Emma did something that made the entire room go silent. She clapped. Not the weak, uncontrolled movement of someone with severe motor impairment, but deliberate, rhythmic applause for her stepmother's speech. The silence that followed was deafening. 70 people staring at a young woman they'd been told couldn't control her movements, watching her applaud with perfect coordination. Patricia's face went white. Emma, honey, But Emma wasn't done. She gripped the arms of her wheelchair and, with fluid grace, pushed herself to her feet. The gasps from the crowd were audible. Someone dropped a plate. I heard Richard's sister whisper, "Oh my God." Emma stood there for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Then she smiled a brilliant, beautiful smile that transformed her entire face and spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried to every corner of the room. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my father's memory. I'm sure he would be very interested to know how his legacy has been honored. The room erupted. People were standing, pointing, talking over each other in shocked voices. Patricia looked like she might faint, her perfect composure completely shattered. "Emma?" she managed to say. "You're confused, honey. You need to sit down. You're not well." "Actually, Patricia," Anna said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I've never been better, and I think it's time everyone knew the truth about my condition and where their generous donations have really been going." David pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Emma, what the hell is happening? You haven't been able to walk? Talk? Think for myself?" Emma's voice was steady, almost conversational. "I've been able to do all of those things for years, David. The question is, did you really not know, or did you just not want to know?" That's when Detective Rodriguez stepped forward, showing her badge. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Detective Rodriguez with the Portland Police Bureau. I need everyone to remain calm while we sort this situation out." The crowd buzzed with confused murmurs, but Emma wasn't finished. "Before anyone tries to paint me as unstable or delusional," she said, pulling a folder from the bag attached to her wheelchair, "I have 14 years of documentation proving exactly what's been happening in this family." She opened the folder and pulled out bank statements, photocopied checks, and printed emails. "Every disability payment that was supposed to support my care, every donation sent by loving family members, every penny of my inheritance from my father's estate, I know where it all went." Emma's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Patricia Henderson has been stealing from me for years. She's been forging my signature on legal documents, lying to government agencies about my condition, and using my disability as a cover for systematic financial abuse." The silence was complete now. Even Patricia had stopped trying to interrupt. "But the money was just the beginning." Emma continued. "She convinced all of you that I was a burden, a tragedy, someone to be pitied and managed. She made my brother believe I was helpless so he wouldn't question why there was always money available when he needed it, money that was supposed to be for my medical care." David's face went from confusion to horror to something approaching panic. "Emma, that's not. I never. Mom, tell her she's wrong." But Patricia said nothing. She just stood there, swaying slightly, her perfect facade cracking more with each passing second. Emma turned to address the crowd directly. "Aunt Margaret, Uncle Paul, remember the $5,000 you sent last year for my specialized medical equipment? It paid for Patricia's trip to Europe. Cousin Tom, that monthly contribution you've been making for my therapy? It's been funding David's car payments." One by one, she went through the crowd, matching faces to financial records, explaining exactly how their generous intentions had been perverted. The expressions on people's faces shifted from shock to understanding to pure outrage. "And David," Emma said, turning to her brother, "that engagement ring you bought, Sarah, the down payment on your condo, your graduate school tuition, all of it came from my accounts. You've been living off stolen money for years." David looked like he might be sick. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Emma, I swear I didn't know." "Didn't know? Or didn't want to know?" Emma's voice was relentless. "Because when Mom said she was managing my finances, Did you ask to see the books? When she had money available for your emergencies, did you question where it came from? Or did you just take what you needed and tell yourself I was too disabled to understand what was happening? The crowd was murmuring angrily now. I could see people pulling out their phones, some to call others, some to record what was happening. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media and the local news. Patricia finally found her voice. This is some kind of breakdown. Emma's been confused lately, making up stories. Sarah's been filling her head with ideas. Actually, I said, speaking for the first time since the revelation began, I have something to add. I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see. I've been recording Patricia's conversations for weeks. Would you like to hear what she really thinks about Emma? Or maybe what she's been planning for my marriage? Patricia's face went gray.
Sarah, don't you dare!
But I was already hitting play on the first recording. Patricia's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. Emma's future is being taken care of. She's safe, she's fed, she has a roof over her head. What more could she want? It's not like she's going anywhere or doing anything meaningful with her life. The reaction from the crowd was immediate and visceral. These people had known Emma since she was a child. They'd mourned the loss of her potential, sent money to help with her care, and watched Patricia play the role of martyred caregiver for years. Hearing her dismiss Emma so callously, so cruelly, was devastating. But I wasn't done. I played the second recording, the one where Patricia discussed her plans to end my marriage and paint me as unstable. The crowd listened in stunned silence as she laid out her strategy to isolate and destroy me. When the recording ended, the silence stretched for long moments before Emma spoke again. Detective Rodriguez has copies of all our evidence, she said. Financial records, forged documents, recorded conversations. I've also been working with a disability rights attorney to file federal charges for mail fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward. Patricia Henderson, I need you to come with me. We have some questions about your management of Emma's finances and medical care. Patricia finally snapped. This is ridiculous. She's been disabled for years. Everyone knows that. You can't just believe. Mom? The detective interrupted calmly. I've seen the medical evaluations. Emma's been examined by 3 independent physicians who confirm she has no physical or cognitive impairments that would prevent her from living independently. The disability you've been claiming simply doesn't exist. That's when the crowd turned ugly. The people who'd been sending money, who'd been manipulated and lied to for years, began shouting questions and accusations. David tried to defend his mother, but his words were drowned out by angry voices demanding answers. How much money did you steal? How could you do this to your own stepdaughter? What kind of person fakes a disability for 14 years? Emma held up her hand for silence, and remarkably, the room quieted. She had command now in a way that was almost regal. I want everyone to understand, she said. But I didn't fake my disability for attention or sympathy. I did it to survive. After my father died, Patricia made it clear that I could either be the helpless invalid she needed me to be, or I could find myself in a state institution. I was 17 years old with nowhere else to go. Her voice broke slightly, and for the first time I saw vulnerability beneath her strength. I spent 5 years planning this moment. 5 years documenting every crime, gathering every piece of evidence, waiting for the right time to expose the truth. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted my life back. She looked directly at David, who was still staring at her in shock. And I wanted my brother to see who our mother really is and who he chose to become when he decided her approval was more important than asking questions. David opened his mouth to respond, but Emma wasn't finished. Sarah, she said, turning to me. You were the first person in years who saw me as a person instead of a problem to be managed. You talked to me, sat with me, treated me like I mattered. When I realized Patricia was planning to destroy you the same way she destroyed me, I knew it was time to act. The room was completely silent now, all attention focused on the young woman who just dismantled an entire family's foundation of lies. Detective Rodriguez moved toward Patricia, who was now sitting in a folding chair, looking older and smaller than I'd ever seen her. Ma'am, I need you to come with me. As Patricia was led away, the crowd began to disperse, but not quietly. People were angry, hurt, betrayed. The murmur of outraged conversations followed them out the door. David stood frozen in the middle of the chaos, staring at Emma like you'd never seen her before. "All those years," he whispered. "All those years? You were okay?" Emma's expression softened slightly. "I wasn't okay, David. I was surviving. There's a difference. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me?" Emma's laugh was sad and bitter. "Because you never asked. In 14 years, you never once asked. After I had no evidence to my parents how, I had no issues and no ways to make you feel better. You literally never asked me how I felt, and the mom died when no one was easy for me. No." David looked at me then, and I saw the moment he realized that everything was over. His relationship with his mother, his marriage to me, his reputation, probably his job. "Sarah," he said desperately. "I didn't know. You have to believe me. I never knew she was stealing from Emma. I never knew about the divorce papers or the investigation." "But you knew she was cruel to me," I said quietly. "You knew she was trying to drive me away, and you let it happen because standing up to her was too hard." He had no answer for that. The community center emptied slowly, leaving just Emma, David, Detective Rodriguez, and me. In the sudden quiet, I could hear Emma's slightly labored breathing, the first sign that maintaining her deception for so long had taken a real physical toll. "I should get you home," I said to Emma. "You must be exhausted." She nodded, then looked at David one more time. "For what it's worth," she said, "I hope you figure out who you want to be now that Mom isn't making all your decisions for you." Then she sat back down in her wheelchair, not because she had to, but because it was easier after standing for so long, and let me wheel her out of the community center. As we left, I heard Detective Rodriguez reading Patricia her rights in the parking lot. Patricia was crying, pleading, insisting there had been some mistake. But there was no mistake, just consequences, finally catching up to choices made years ago. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment, a bright, airy space in a part of town I actually chose for myself. Writing this story, Emma is in the kitchen making tea, humming off key but happily while she works. Patricia pled guilty to financial exploitation, identity theft, and fraud. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution that will keep her in debt for the rest of her life. The federal charges are still pending. David's company fired him 3 days after the reunion when the story hit local news. His professional reputation was destroyed so thoroughly that he had to leave Portland entirely. I heard he's working at a car dealership somewhere in Arizona, but I haven't verified that, and I don't plan to. Our divorce was finalized last month. I kept everything I came into the marriage with, and half of what we'd accumulated together, which, as it turns out, wasn't much, since most of his assets were purchased with stolen money. Emma is thriving in ways that still amaze me. She's taking college courses online, learning to drive, and working part-time for the disability rights organization that helped her build her case. She's also in therapy, processing years of trauma and learning how to live openly after so long in hiding. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked her recently. "The years you lost pretending to be disabled?" She thought about it for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary," she said finally. "But I don't regret surviving, and I don't regret waiting for the right moment to fight back." Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about what happened to David and Patricia. The answer is complicated. I don't feel good about anyone's life being destroyed, even people who tried to destroy mine. But I also don't feel guilty about protecting myself and helping Emma reclaim her life. The truth is, David and Patricia made their choices years before Emma and I made ours. They chose to value money over integrity, control over compassion, image over honesty. We just chose to stop letting them get away with it. I've learned that sometimes the people who seem the most helpless are actually the strongest, and the people who seem the most powerful are actually the most fragile. Patricia built her entire identity on controlling others. So when that control was stripped away, she had nothing left. Emma, on the other hand, spent years building inner strength while everyone around her saw only weakness. When she finally revealed who she really was, she was unbreakable. As for me, I learned that marriage isn't supposed to make you smaller, and family isn't supposed to make you feel alone. I learned that my instincts were right, my feelings were valid, and my voice mattered. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst impulses, even if that someone is the person you promised to love forever. Emma just called from the kitchen that the tea is ready. In a few minutes, we'll sit on the couch and plan our weekend, or discuss the book she's reading for her psychology class, or just enjoy the quiet companionship of two people who helped each other survive. It's a good life, an honest life, and worth every difficult moment it took to get here. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped by someone else's version of who you should be, I hope you'll remember that you always have more power than you think. Sometimes it just takes the right moment and the right ally to use it. Hit that like button if you believe in justice served cold, and subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to stay victims, because everyone deserves to live their truth, even when others profit from their silence.